November 9th, 1990 started out like any other morning in Texas, but it quickly turned into one of the most shocking days in the history of music. In a sudden and massive move, federal agents from the IRS completely locked down and raided the famous Dripping Springs Ranch and the Pedernales recording studio. Within just a few hours, decades of hard work, priceless music history, and a massive fortune were completely sealed off from the man who built it all. The public was left in absolute disbelief. Willie Nelson was the ultimate symbol of outlaw country, a free-spirited, rebellious musician who lived life entirely on his own terms. Yet overnight, he became the biggest debtor in American history. The government handed him a mind-blowing tax bill of $16.7 million, which included a mountain of back taxes, heavy penalties, and years of accumulated interest. While his empire was crumbling back home in Texas, Willie Nelson was actually out in Hawaii playing a round of golf. When the shocking news reached him, he showed an incredibly calm attitude that surprised everyone. Instead of panicking or hiding from the cameras, the legendary singer faced the media with his signature relaxed smile, showing the world that even a multi-million-dollar government raid couldn't break his spirit. Behind the scenes, this historic raid was the result of a financial storm that had been brewing since the early 1980s. Willie had gotten involved in some tax shelter investments that the government later ruled illegal. When the IRS came knocking for their money, the bill had ballooned to that crazy $16.7 million figure. Willie's lawyers managed to negotiate the cash payout down to $6 million, but there was a major catch. Willie's bank accounts were completely empty. His daughter Lana Nelson later opened up about the family's financial reality during this chaotic time. She explained that her father was simply too generous for his own good and spent money so freely that he didn't even have $30,000 in cash to his name when the raid happened. He loved helping people and funding projects, completely ignoring his own financial health until it was too late. The IRS didn't care about his legendary status. They moved forward with one of the largest personal property seizures ever seen in the entertainment world. Government officials sealed off his properties across 4 different states. They took his vast ranches, his golf club, his recording equipment, his instruments, and even his master tapes, the literal blueprints of his entire musical legacy. Everything was packed up and scheduled to be sold off to the highest bidder at a public auction. Before the government could freeze everything, Willie had his daughter Lana sneak his beloved acoustic guitar Trigger out of the house and ship it to him. Trigger was a heavily worn Martin N20 guitar that carried the signatures of his closest friends and held his signature sound. To Willie, houses and land were replaceable, but Trigger was his soul. As he famously remarked to the media, "As long as I got my guitar, I'll be fine." The raid looked like the tragic end of an empire, but it actually sparked a very unique solution. IRS spokeswoman Valerie Thornton later explained to the media that the agency does try to work with taxpayers, and if they have to create a unique payment plan that benefits everyone, they will do it. In Willie's case, this creative plan meant he would have to use the only thing he had left, his voice and his guitar, to pay his way out of the hole. It was the beginning of an extraordinary comeback story that showed just how resilient a true outlaw could be. This historic crackdown didn't just take away his houses and cars. It threatened to completely erase his ability to make music and earn a living. At 57 years old, an age when most people are looking forward to a comfortable retirement, Willie Nelson was pushed right into a massive financial black hole, forcing him to start over from absolute zero. To understand how a beloved music icon could suddenly find himself owing $16.7 million to the government, you have to look into the shadows of the financial world. Willie Nelson didn't end up in a financial black hole because he was trying to cheat the system. Instead, he fell victim to high-priced professionals who promised to protect his hard-earned money, but ended up leading him straight into a trap. Back in the 1980s, Willie was at the absolute peak of his fame and earning power. Money was pouring in from hit records, sold-out tours, and movie roles. Like many wealthy entertainers, Willie knew he needed professional help to manage this massive influx of cash. He wanted to focus entirely on his music and his fans, so he handed his financial keys over to Price Waterhouse, one of the biggest and most prestigious accounting firms in the entire world. The contrast between the two sides was night and day. On one side, you had Willie, a dusty, down-to-earth country musician with long braids who just wanted to play his guitar. On the other side, you had wealthy financial experts in sharp suits working out of shiny glass skyscrapers in New York. These corporate advisors convinced Willie that they had the perfect foolproof plan to shield his wealth from heavy government taxes. They guided him to pour millions of dollars into a specific investment program called Sentinel Government Securities. The experts promised Willie that these investments were completely legitimate tax shelters that would legally lower his tax bills. Trusting their global reputation, Willie happily signed the paperwork, and went back on the road to make more music, believing his future was totally secure. Unfortunately, it was all a giant illusion. These high-end financial shelters weren't safe at all. In fact, the government eventually flagged them as illegal tax evasion schemes. The trouble officially started in 1984 when the IRS stepped in, looked at Willie's financial files from the early 1980s, and completely rejected the tax deductions his accountants had claimed. To make matters worse, Willie's trusted financial team had been keeping him completely in the dark. Instead of paying the taxes or telling Willie about the mounting trouble, the accountants quietly kept filing for tax extensions year after year without actually sending any payments to the government. Because the bills were ignored, massive penalties and high interest rates began to multiply at a terrifying speed. By the time Willie finally realized what was happening, the damage was already done. He was completely blindsided. The very people he paid millions to protect him had actually pushed him into financial ruin. Willie was just a country singer who trusted the experts only to find out that his money was gone and he was left holding the bag for a multi-million-dollar mess. He fought back by launching a massive lawsuit against the accounting firm, which was eventually settled out of court in 1993. But the painful lesson remained: trusting the wrong people in sharp suits can cost you everything you've ever worked for. When the government completely locked down Willie Nelson's entire world in 1990, they took his houses, his land, his recording studio, and his bank accounts. But there was one priceless treasure they couldn't touch thanks to a daring middle-of-the-night rescue mission. That treasure was a beat-up, heavily worn 1969 Martin N20 acoustic guitar named Trigger. To anyone else, it looked like a piece of junk with a massive hole worn right through the wood, but to Willie, Trigger was his absolute soul. He loved that guitar so much that he openly told the world, "If Trigger goes, I retire." Willie's bond with Trigger went back decades. He had originally bought the nylon string guitar in 1969, and it had been by his side through every single high and low of his career. It was covered in hundreds of scratched-in signatures from his closest friends and fellow music legends, including Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings. Willie cherished it so deeply that back in 1969, when his house caught fire on Christmas Day, he didn't run to save his clothes or his money. He ran straight into the flames to rescue Trigger and a bag of premium weed. So when the IRS storm started closing in during the late months of 1990, Willie knew his beloved guitar was in extreme danger. He knew the government agents would view Trigger as a high-value collector's item and grab it to sell at a public auction. Willie refused to let that happen. Working quickly, he called his daughter Lana Nelson and put a secret rescue plan into action. Before the federal agents could officially march in and seal up his Pedernales recording studio, Lana slipped onto the property under the cover of darkness. She quietly sneaked into the studio, grabbed Trigger, and packed it safely inside its case. To keep the government from tracking it down, she immediately shipped the guitar across the ocean to Hawaii, where Willie was staying. Even after it arrived in Hawaii, they didn't take any chances. Trigger was passed along to Willie's trusted manager, who kept it hidden away in a secret safe location completely out of the government's reach. While the IRS successfully seized his multi-million-dollar ranches and golf courses, Trigger remained completely safe in hiding until all of Willie's legal and financial battles were finally settled in 1993. This successful midnight escape was a massive turning point for Willie. The government had stripped him of almost everything he owned, but by saving his guitar, they left him with his most powerful weapon. Trigger became the unique tool that allowed the 57-year-old musician to go back to work, play his shows, and literally strum his way out of a $16.7 million hole. Over the years, people often asked Willie why he never fixed the massive ragged hole on the front of the guitar, which had been worn away by decades of intense strumming. Willie always refused, explaining that fixing the wood would change the unique, beautiful sound of the instrument. That scarred, damaged guitar, still singing beautifully despite its wounds, became the ultimate symbol of Willie Nelson himself. It showed the world that no matter how hard life hits you and no matter how much the system tries to break you, you can still hold on to your soul and make something beautiful out of the wreckage. With his bank accounts completely empty and his multi-million-dollar empire locked down by federal agents, Willie Nelson and his legal team had to think way outside the box. The government needed cash, and Willie only had his talent and his rescued guitar Trigger. What followed was one of the most unusual, creative, and historic business deals in the history of the music industry. In 1991, Willie's lawyers and the IRS sat down and agreed to a groundbreaking deal. Willie would literally use his music to pay off his massive government debt. The plan was completely unprecedented. Willie went into a quiet recording studio with absolutely no fancy production, no big backup band, and no expensive studio tricks. It was just one man, his raw voice, and his beat-up acoustic guitar Trigger. Over the course of the sessions, he poured his heart into recording a beautiful stripped-down double album filled with old country classics and deeply personal songs. The resulting project was given a hilarious and brutally honest title, The IRS Tapes Who'll Buy My Memories. The artwork and the name leaned right into his financial misery, turning a public embarrassment into a clever marketing campaign. But because major record stores weren't set up to automatically send profits directly to the government, Willie and his team had to launch a wild grassroots marketing strategy. Initially, the album wasn't sold in traditional music shops. Instead, it was marketed through television commercials where fans were told to call a special 1-800 toll-free hotline to order the 2-cassette or 2-CD set for $19.90. The financial breakdown of each sale was highly specific and strictly monitored by federal officials. Out of that $19.90 price tag, exactly $6 went directly into a special fund managed by the government. From that amount, $3 went straight toward knocking down Willie's massive back taxes bill, while the other $3 was safely set aside to help fund Willie's ongoing multi-million-dollar lawsuit against his former accounting firm, Price Waterhouse. Eventually, Sony Music stepped in to help distribute the album on a much larger scale, making it easier for everyday fans to buy a copy at their local shops. From a purely financial standpoint, the phone order campaign was a bit messy and didn't completely solve Willie's problems overnight, bringing in around $3.6 million for the IRS. However, from an artistic standpoint, the album was an absolute masterpiece. Music critics and fans all over the world fell in love with the project. Without the slick, overproduced sounds of 1990s country music, listeners were treated to the purest form of Willie Nelson's artistry. The raw, intimate recordings felt less like a commercial product and more like a private living room concert. The IRS tapes didn't just generate millions of dollars to satisfy the tax collectors. It completely reshaped Willie's public image. Instead of looking like a wealthy tax evader, the public saw a hard-working, resilient folk hero who was willing to pick up his guitar and work his fingers to the bone to make things right. It proved to the entire entertainment industry that true talent and a loyal fan base are worth way more than any bank account, setting a permanent example of how to face a massive crisis with dignity, humor, and pure soul. When the IRS officially put Willie Nelson's seized possessions up for public auction to satisfy his massive debt, government officials expected a standard high-stakes bidding war. They figured wealthy collectors and corporate buyers would swoop in to snatch up his valuable gold records, music awards, clothing, and historic furniture. Instead, the government's plan ran directly into a brick wall of pure Texas loyalty. The official auctions quickly transformed into something resembling a giant, chaotic family reunion driven by a tight-knit community that refused to let their hometown hero get wiped out. As the auctions kicked off under the blazing Texas sun, the crowd looked completely different from a typical high-end art sale. The bidding floor wasn't filled with slick investors and luxury cars. Instead, it was packed to the brim with everyday working people, local farmers wearing dusty cowboy hats, longtime friends like legendary football coach Darrell Royal, and thousands of fiercely loyal music fans. Together, this crowd put a brilliant silent protest into motion. Every time the IRS auctioneer stepped up to the microphone to yell out a valuable item, a wave of absolute silence would wash over the crowd. Nobody would raise their hand. If anyone did bid, it was always a coordinated, dirt-cheap offer. These deliberate lowball bids were a smart strategy designed to keep the prices completely bottomed out. If an outside buyer or a wealthy stranger tried to step in and make a real offer on Willie's things, the local crowd would glare them down, making it crystal clear that outsiders were absolutely not welcome to profit off Willie's misery. Because of this massive community effort, the government couldn't generate the big payouts they wanted. This incredible display of unity wasn't just about a love for country music. It was a powerful act of gratitude. For years, Willie Nelson had used his own fame and money to fight for everyday people. In 1985, he had co-founded Farm Aid, a massive benefit concert organization dedicated to raising millions of dollars to keep family-owned farms from going bankrupt. The very farmers Willie had spent years protecting were now standing on the auction floor using their own limited cash to protect him right back. The plan worked beautifully. Friends, neighbors, and loyal fans successfully bought up the vast majority of Willie's seized personal property for pennies on the dollar. But they didn't take the items home to put on their own shelves. As soon as the paperwork cleared and the government agents walked away, these loyal supporters turned around and handed the keys, the awards, and the memorabilia straight back to Willie. The most heartwarming moment of the entire saga involved Willie's beloved Dripping Springs Ranch. A deeply loyal supporter stepped up and purchased the massive property during the government sale, Instead of moving in or flipping it for a profit, the buyer turned around and offered the ranch back to Willie on a special lease agreement. The rent, a single symbolic dollar bills per year. Through this beautiful act of kindness, the community proved that some things are far more valuable than cash. The IRS thought they could break an outlaw country star by taking away his physical wealth, but they completely underestimated the power of the people he had helped along the way. Willie's network of loyal country boys successfully flipped the script on the federal government, turning a stressful corporate crackdown into a historic story of love, loyalty, and ultimate survival. While Willie Nelson was busy strumming his guitar and selling albums through a TV hotline to pay off the government, a much bigger fight was happening behind closed doors. This wasn't a battle fought with music. It was a high-stakes, multi-million-dollar legal war inside a federal courtroom. Willie and his powerhouse attorney Jay Goldberg decided to stop playing defense and go directly after the people who had created this massive mess in the first place, the elite corporate accountants at Price Waterhouse. The legal showdown was a classic story of an underdog taking on a giant. On one side, you had Willie, a down-to-earth country singer from Texas who just wanted to make music. On the other side, you had one of the most powerful, wealthy financial firms on Wall Street armed with an army of expensive defense lawyers. Willie's team filed a massive lawsuit against the firm, aggressively arguing that the high-paid accountants had been incredibly careless. They pointed out that Price Waterhouse had pushed Willie's hard-earned money into illegal tax evasion schemes without ever warning him about the massive financial risks involved. Price Waterhouse did not take these accusations sitting down. They immediately launched a massive public relations defense, fighting back with sharp press statements. The firm tried to shift 100% of the blame away from themselves, publicly arguing that Willie Nelson was a grown man who made his own personal investment choices. They claimed that he and his private financial advisors knew exactly what they were getting into, and that they shouldn't blame the accounting firm just because their risky financial bets didn't pan out. But as the legal battle heated up, Willie's lawyers began uncovering a mountain of damaging evidence. They exposed deep financial mismanagement within the firm, showing that the accountants had kept Willie completely in the dark, while his penalties and interest rates ballooned to dangerous levels. Facing a long, messy public trial that would completely destroy their global reputation, the Wall Street executives realized they were losing the fight. In 1993, the two sides finally reached a secret dramatic agreement outside of court. Price Waterhouse agreed to pay Willie Nelson a massive confidential settlement worth millions of dollars. While the exact final number was legally locked away from the public, the payout was absolutely huge. This secret settlement turned out to be the ultimate winning card for Willie. By combining this massive corporate payout with the millions of dollars he had already raised from selling the IRS tapes, Willie finally had enough cash to completely erase his remaining debt with the federal government. The legal victory completely cleared his name, proving to the world that he wasn't a criminal trying to dodge his taxes. He was just a trusting artist who had been taken advantage of by corporate insiders. By refusing to back down, Willie didn't just save himself from total bankruptcy. He forced one of the biggest financial giants on Wall Street to pay for their mistakes, completing one of the greatest financial comebacks in music history. In 1995, Willie Nelson finally reached the end of a long, exhausting 5-year journey under the strict watch of the federal government. He handed over a final payment of $3 million, bringing the total amount he paid to the IRS to around $9 million. With that last transaction, his massive, decade-long tax nightmare was officially over. For most celebrities, a massive financial scandal like this would completely ruin their reputation and leave them hiding from the public eye forever. But Willie Nelson isn't most celebrities. Instead of destroying his career, this crazy crisis actually turned him into an absolute folk hero. The American public loved how Willie handled the entire situation. He didn't run away, he didn't make whiny excuses, and he never blamed the system. He just picked up his rescued guitar trigger and went straight to work playing show after show to earn the cash he owed. His calm, relaxed attitude and his unbelievable work ethic during the crisis completely solidified his image as the ultimate outlaw. To the public, he wasn't a tax evader. He was a resilient, old-school rebel who faced a massive corporate storm with total dignity and a smile on his face. His massive comeback reached its absolute peak on the stage of Farm Aid. After years of fighting to save his own properties and career, Willie stood proudly in front of roaring crowds of thousands of working-class Americans. This wasn't just a regular music concert anymore. It was a giant, emotional victory lap. As he strummed Trigger and sang his classic hits alongside his legendary buddies Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings, the message to the world was loud and clear. The government could seize his ranches, lock down his studio, and empty his bank accounts, but they could never confiscate his talent, his freedom, or his outlaw spirit. By tackling his massive $16.7 million problem with pure honesty and hard work, Willie Nelson elevated himself from a standard country music star into a permanent American cultural icon. He proved that true value doesn't live in a bank account or a piece of real estate. It lives in your character and your connection with everyday people. He took the absolute biggest hit the federal government could throw at him, stood his ground, and strummed his way back to the top of the world on his own terms.